thanks for tuning in today. Whether you're by yourself or with team and others, this is a great opportunity to have a conversation with us because we want to have that dialogue so that it's not just a one-way street. The way to do that is social media, of course. If you haven't followed our accounts, I urge you to check out that second screen right now. Look us up, follow, and let us know how you're doing, where you're logging in from, and don't forget all day, use the hashtag Future.Bible. So, how do you find us? Across all the channels, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you can look us up at Bible TLD. That's our handle, Bible TLD. Now, TLD stands for Top Level Domain Name, and that's because American Bible Society has launched an actual internet registry for the .bible website address. That's right. Right now, you can go and register any URL that you want. It has a .bible ending, and you can do it online. To find out more information, you can go to www.get.bible. Again, it's www.get.bible. You can find out more information about the .bible TLD. Let's get right to our next speaker, and I'll catch you afterwards.
Well, hello. I'm really excited to join this amazing event to talk about expanding engagement possibilities with artificial intelligence, or AI. I'm Daniel Whitenack. I'm a data scientist with SIL International. If you're not familiar with SIL International, we work all around the world doing a lot of different things, including Bible translation, but also including things like early childhood education in the mother tongue, technology development for things like keyboards, but I'm specifically involved in efforts to expand AI capabilities such as speech-to-text and text-to-speech and machine translation and entity analysis and a lot of these other things that are driving a lot of modern applications and expanding those into local languages. I also co-host a podcast about AI called Practical AI. So I encourage you, if you're interested in these subjects, to check that out. And maybe also, if you're new to AI, I'm doing a live online training in AI called AI Classroom. That's happening in May. So if you're interested in finding out more about AI and really maybe developing your own AI applications, I encourage you to check that out at datadan.io. But like I said, today I'm going to be talking about expanding engagement possibilities with artificial intelligence. And as we approach this subject, I definitely have seen over the years, as I've been working with AI for almost 10 years now, I've seen a lot of people solve problems with artificial intelligence that could be solved in a lot more simple ways. And so as I approach this problem of scripture engagement, I don't want to just assume that AI is going to have an impact here, but I really want to dig out into what scripture engagement is and why AI could help expand possibilities for scripture engagement. And so in doing that, I wanted to just understand a little bit more for myself what scripture engagement is. And I pulled this off of the SIL website, which talks about scripture engagement having to do with accessing scriptures, understanding scriptures, and interacting meaningfully with scriptures. And so when I'm thinking about engagement, I'm thinking about accessing, understanding, and interacting with scriptures. And so then if I have that picture of engagement in my mind, the question is, why would AI make an impact for scripture engagement, and how could it make an impact for scripture engagement? Now, the interesting thing is that access to and interaction with and understanding of information and media is really being driven by AI across the board in industry. Pretty much every email you write now, every Google search you make, runs through some sort of AI model. And so we shouldn't really be surprised that when we're talking about access and interaction and understanding, that AI might play a role in this. So let's go through each of those in this session and figure out how AI might make an impact and expand possibilities. And so the first of those that we're going to talk about is access. Now, this might be sort of familiar to a lot of people that are working in the Bible translation movement, but for those that aren't aware, there's still thousands of languages out there that do not have access to Scripture. And so when I'm thinking of access to Scripture, one of the first things that comes to mind is translation. And when I'm thinking about AI, one of the things that AI has made the biggest impact on in recent years is translation. In fact, over the last 2 years or so, there have been a ton of neural machine translation models running on a principle called attention. You might have heard these things called transformers, or maybe you've just seen people refer to sort of large-scale language models. Anyway, these things have been making a huge impact on machine translation for high resource languages, like English, Chinese, Spanish, French, German. And in fact, these models have been shown to actually exceed the performance of human translators when translating in high resource languages like English to German and back. The thing that's interesting about our situation with Scripture is that most languages that don't have access to Scripture are not high resource languages, and they're not supported by platforms, let's say like Google Translate. And so the question is, could these sorts of AI models still have an impact for access to Scripture? Now, there may be all sorts of things that we want to dive into in terms of how we should approach this problem with AI, including, we may or may not want to just produce a draft of Scripture with an AI model. But I can describe a little bit of the things that we've been thinking about at SIL in terms of how these machine translation models might actually come into the picture. And one of those is with back translation. So if you're familiar with the Scripture translation process, it often involves a consultant coming in to check the quality of a translation. And that process involves back translating from the target language back to a higher resource language that the consultant might understand very well. Let's say that's English or French or something. And so oftentimes these back translations are using sort of rule-based approaches, and although they might be accurate, they're not so natural in how they sound. And so this can actually cause a pretty big slowdown in the translation process. But I wanted to show here, so this is work by a guy named Sammy Leeds. And if you read through this translation, you can probably recognize where it's from. There might be a few oddities here and there, but this is clearly from the first part of Genesis, and it's very understandable and it's fairly natural. And this is actually an AI generated translation of Genesis. So this is a model that used only Scripture translations. So about 52 Scripture translations to train this AI model. And using only 52 translations, it was able to back translate from a target language back to English this sort of quality of translation. And so at SIL, we're very interested in this because we have, hundreds and hundreds of reference translations of Scripture. And so we're very interested in the fact that using this sort of multilingual approach to translation, we might be able to kind of improve this back translation process and maybe even develop new ways of evaluating translations using back translations with AI that might help speed up that sort of consultant checking process that's very, very slow. And there's also, of course, a lot of other things that we're interested in terms of translation, like translating resources for translation teams, like commentaries and encyclopedia articles, or even just translating devotional material and other material that's Bible related, but maybe not the Bible itself. So this is something very interesting and exciting that we're looking into. Moving on to past access to understanding. Understanding you might think that this is sort of outside of the realm of computers. But it's kind of interesting how over, again, the past couple of years, there's been this explosion in natural language processing technology that has really shown a lot of capabilities of models to understand large pieces of text. One of those types of technologies is called reading comprehension. So this is an illustration of a reading comprehension model that's operating in a browser that's allowing a user to ask a question and then pointing to them to the answer of that question in this case in a blog article. And so in this case, the AI model is actually taking the user question and it's taking this very large article and it's helping point the user to the appropriate answer in this article, which for me is really exciting. It goes beyond, Control F searching and to this level of understanding and answer generation. Now, this got me and others in SIL really thinking about, a particular situation, which again comes back to consultant checking and Bible translation. So oftentimes there's a large set of questions that's used by a consultant to help that consultant check the comprehension of a scripture translation. So they might ask who did this in this passage or what happened in this passage, and they would like those from the community to answer those questions to see if they're actually comprehending the right answers through scripture. Now, this is not specific to translation, right? I know myself and probably a lot of people in the audience are all the time asking questions of scripture and seeking to find answers in scripture, or just wondering, hey, where was this mentioned? Who was this person's relative, or how are things related throughout scripture? And I think that this is a really good target technology to try to fill in some of those informational gaps. And so what I did in a recent experiment was I took a couple of these reading comprehension models and I tried to just ask those reading comprehension models a couple of the comprehension questions that are used in Bible translation. And this is the result. So here we can see the context, or this is like the reference article of which I'm asking a question. And so I'm asking a question about Acts 1 through 2, and you can read it there. And the question that I asked the AI model was, to whom did the writer of Acts address this book? And the AI generated answer, which is really cool, is Theophilus. So we can see in this case, we were able actually to extract the right information from not the most simply composed verse. It might be kind of hard for some people to pick out some of that information. Here's another example, just asking another question out of the same passage. What had the writer written about in his first book? And here we can see the generated answer is all that Jesus began to do and teach. So this is pretty cool. You could see how this could be a sort of question-answer interface for consultants, for translators, but also for people just exploring the Bible and engaging with the Bible to kind of help aid them in understanding Scripture. So we're really excited to explore this more, and we have more experiments planned. Finally, moving past access and understanding, let's talk about interaction with Scripture. And interactions all across industry, whether that be customer service interactions or whether that be purchase interactions, those are all being impacted by AI. So again, it's not surprising that AI might play a role in the sort of interaction side of engagement. And one of the collaborations I've been working with recently is a team at Christian Vision in their digital AI lab that's working with chatbot technology and helping people engage around spiritual questions and around the Bible in a chat interface. And what's been so crazy to see for me is that people are really willing to have spiritual and Bible-based conversation in a chatbot online, even to an extent that they would not have in person for whatever reasons, especially in certain parts of the world, right? So I just wanted to share one example interaction from this work. So this is the first message is from the user. He says, "Can I get to heaven by being good?" Which is a real question asked by a user in the chatbot, which is so cool to see. And you can see the chatbot that we've worked on, which is very dynamic. There's no sort of decision tree here. It just responds to what the user says and kind of flows with the conversation, the way that the user wants to talk about and the topics they want to talk about. And you can see that we built in a couple of things here because we're not sure quite yet that we're always going to give the right answer. So there's kind of a scaffolding bit there that says, I'm not quite sure, but let me try. And then, but then actually the chatbot gives a really great answer. The chatbot says Christ alone was good enough to earn heaven. And this was not a pre-programmed response. This is actually something the chatbot, the AI models within the chatbot came up on its own. And this just gives me a lot of encouragement that there's so many people seeking out questions like this online and asking things about the Bible online, that there may be really interesting interfaces that we can build with AI technology to kind of help them facilitate those types of interactions. So thank you so much for letting me share a few of the things that I'm excited about. There's so many other experiments going on and AI efforts by so many people all around the world. I'm happy to connect people with any of those efforts if they have interest. Happy to answer questions if you reach out to me, and just really excited to be part of this event.